All right. Welcome to another episode of the Main Basketball Rankings podcast. I'm your host, basketball data nerd, Lucas McNally. My guest today, you recognize him from that one call against your favorite team that didn't go your way. Uh, Chris Barstow, you are the secretary of the Maine Basketball Council, right? Is that right?
I am. I have a couple of hats in officiating. I am the secretary for the Maine Basketball Council. I'm the secretary treasurer for the local Central Maine IABO basketball chapter. And then with my baseball hat on, I'm the rules interpreter for the Mid-Coast Umpire Association,
Oh.
for baseball umpires specifically. And to kind of go on, are you sure it was only one call that somebody's upset with me about? Might be a couple.
How do you keep track of which team you're going to screw over on a given night? Is it like, do you flip a coin? Is it?
I've actually got an Excel spreadsheet. It kind of
Mm.
works like your main basketball ranking sheet, and then that's what I follow. I make sure I look at it before I go into the gym that night.
That's
Yes,
that's smart because you don't want to get the same team over and over again because then they'll catch on. You know.
exactly. Yes, it's one of those things we want to keep the probability equal. We want everybody to be on their toes, no doubt about it.
All right. So my first question is, how did someone get into refing? Like, did you grow up in a house like in The Bear where there's just a lot of yelling? Like, what's the how did someone like transition into this?
So I think there's two ways to answer the question. The first thing is I'm going to talk about my story and how I got into officiating. And then I'm going to segue into how somebody can become an official today.
Great.
So my story is that when I was in high school, I realized that I wasn't going to have the athletic ability to compete on the baseball team. I was a student manager for the basketball team. I actually had the great opportunity to work with Kevin Jenkins. He was the head coach at Gorham High School, which is my alma mater. And I would help out on Saturdays doing fifth and sixth grade Pee Wee basketball officiating there. And then my love was always baseball. And I had an opportunity to do a 3 hour Saturday morning course with a former professional umpire that lived in our community. And once you completed that course, you were eligible to do Cal Ripken baseball and softball games. And you get paid $20 a game, and you got your hot dog and soda at the end of the game. And it's one of those things that at about 15 or 16 years old, I went and took that course. I was getting assigned games and working those with a lot of great partners and great mentors at that time. I think the vocation of officiating is one of those things that you either love it or hate it. There's rarely an in between with regards to somebody that gets involved in it. And I just found it to be a wonderful conduit to be involved with the sport because the thinking that goes into being an official, being prepared to be in the right position, make the right call, and being involved in the game. And you hear a lot of those stories now with people who are officials where my playing days were over and I wanted to stay involved and it was an alternative to coaching because coaching might not have been a fit for them individually. So we've
Right.
gotten some great officials in that regard. When I was 18 and a freshman in college, I took the training course when I got old enough to become a certified Maine high school baseball umpire. Many know Bruce Anderson. He was my instructor. My first assigner was the chairman of the Peter Webb All Stars, Peter Webb. He was my baseball assigner. And he's always been somebody that was, all joking aside, he has been a great mentor and a great leader for me in my officiating career, both in baseball and basketball. And then from there, I've been involved with baseball for 28 years. I've been involved with basketball for 18 years, and I've been a football official also for 8 years. And I've done college baseball for 8 years. So it's one of those things that I've found different avenues to be able to expand on my officiating involvement, both with the multiple sports, and then have the opportunity to be involved on the administrative side, which is where we have the titles that came from to start off the show today. Now, to answer the other part of the question, how does somebody become an official now, besides coming from a household, as you would say, where there's maybe a lot of conflict and a lot of need for resolution? So, right now, if you want to become an official, this is really the best time ever to get involved. And that's
Because
for a
there's a
couple of
shortage.
reasons. Well, we've got the shortage. So, I mean, everybody knows about the shortage. We've publicized the shortage, and I think there's several reasons for the shortage. My personal opinion, I think sportsmanship plays a factor, but I think that gets highlighted way too much. I think often what it comes down to is that people need to find a way in order to get involved in officiating to balance it with either their family and their commitments there. They might have children that are playing a sport that they want to officiate and they can't balance that out. And then also work commitment. And it's one of those things that some of us, like myself, are very fortunate to be able to balance work, family, and officiating and be able to do well and prioritize appropriately with all of them. But I know a lot of people, they may want to get into officiating, but they can't do that. So I find those are more the barriers than it is the situation of the behavior of teams, the behavior of coaches. I mean, sportsmanship is an issue. Sportsmanship is something that needs to be continually addressed. I think we all intrinsically need to look at ourselves and how we behave in a competitive environment. But I also don't think that is the one thing that's keeping people out of it as a barrier. The
That makes
things that
sense.
are in our favor, two things that I love to highlight, and I know the coordinator of officials for basketball, Mr. Halliday, has highlighted this within our ranks, is that right now you can utilize technology, whereas it used to be that you would go for 6 straight weeks on a Wednesday and you would sit down and do a 2 to 3 hour course at one of the local high schools and be in attendance for in-person rules training. We now have IABO University, which is rolled out throughout the country, actually. And it allows you to do the rules training online on your own pace within a 90-day window. And then once you graduate from the rules training, you come and work with your local chapter. So we get a lot of officials that they'll graduate in, let's say, July, and then we'll try to work with them to informally get some floor education opportunities, maybe work some of the summer tournaments. And then we have, and they do a middle school league on Sunday mornings. And we get a lot of our new officials out there to work actual games with actual situations. And then myself and other veterans take our Sundays and go out and help as mentors and evaluators with that training process. And it helps to get officials ready. I think the other aspect of it too is if you're willing to make that commitment, you do the online training and then you do the floor education training. And then we try to help with regards to reducing the barriers of cost associated with becoming an official. That shortage is a blessing and a curse. You can work as much as you want because the opportunities are there to work if you show that you have the commitment, the ability. But if you're somebody that's looking to not only get involved in officiating, but want to progress and they have a goal of working on the floor that's in your background, for example, there's more opportunities nowadays than I would say there were 20 years ago, where there wasn't as much movement with tournament eligible officials. So on both ends of it, both with progress once you get involved and the process to become an official, it's a great time to become one, quite frankly.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was probably 10, 15 years ago. Jeff Kinney, who I grew up with, was trying to convince me to become an official. And there was like there's the classes you were talking about, and it just seemed like a whole hassle. And I was like, I don't have time for all
Mhm.
this. But now, if it was an online course and I wasn't doing this, then I would probably like more realistically look at it and go, yeah, okay, that
Yeah.
makes some sense.
If that whole information and entertainment empire that you've set up for yourself didn't work out, yes, there's always officiating available for you.
Yeah, and it is like you said, it's a way to stay involved in the game, and I think we all understand that there's a real community of the main high school basketball world and baseball and football as well, and there's some value to staying a part of that as opposed to just being someone sitting up in the bleachers.
I think if you spoke to anybody who was ever a student athlete or they were part of a team, I think more times than not, they're going to reflect upon in the past, not that great pass they won or that great pass they made to a teammate for the winning basket or the big 3-pointer that they stuck in order to win a game. A lot of times more it's the reflection of the time on the bus with their teammates, the time in the locker room, this funny thing that happened with your good friend on the team. And I think through officiating, it ends up being that same thing. Yeah, we see some great games, but the older I get, the more I appreciate the people I have met and appreciate the people that I'm able to connect with. When the start of the basketball season comes around, there's nothing better than when I look at my first set of assignments and I see the coaches that I'm going to be able to say hello to and be in their gym on that night, because I maybe haven't seen them for 3, 4, 5 months, and to
Sure.
be able to connect with them again. There are certain administrators, there's certain fans that you go into the gym and you know you're going to see Bob Smith when you go to whatever school you're at that night, and he may razzle you a little bit, but he also is going to appreciate you, and you're going to appreciate him for bringing energy to that gym. I think that's the big thing about Maine high school basketball is Maine high school basketball has been extremely blessed the last several years with the talent that has come through Maine, and you've done a great job of highlighting that. But I think the energy that comes from the fans from the local communities that get involved, fill those gyms, and on a cold Friday night, you still can go in and have that same energy and nostalgia that we had when you and I were in high school. I mean, that's an awesome thing. And to be an official and be involved in it in that regard, can't beat it.
One thing I wanted to ask you about with regards to the fans and with sportsmanship is when the fans are really like on your case, is that like, does that bother officials, or are you like a wrestling villain where you just fuels you and you feed off it?
So let me speak for myself personally. I think that for me, I've got two ways that I cope with it. The first way is that I've got a job to do,
Mm-hmm.
and I've got to keep my focus within the confines of the court. And I also have to have selective hearing. And that selective hearing applies to, and all joking aside, that selective hearing applies especially to the fans, but it also at times is having to do with the coaches. And it's one of those things that I may have a coach say something, but I need to make a determination as to whether or not it's something that I need to address because of the sporting behavior, or if it's a clarification or something that they're bringing to my attention that I want to acknowledge and say, yes, coach, I'll watch for that moving screen. Yes, coach, I'll watch to make sure that there is verticality on the rebounding action, whatever it may be. And then let's say you do have a ruling that is seen as controversial or maybe incorrect by our trained officials in the stands. It's one of those things that's where we have to go back as officials and make sure, are we properly versed in the rules? Have we done our preparation appropriately? And if we are 100% sure with what we saw, it's one of those things that you can't let the emotion of either the moment or the crowd influence knowing that you were 100% right in the ruling that you just made. TJ has done a great job over the last couple of years, and the site supervisors that are a part of the tournament, in making a clarification between errors of commission versus errors of omission. So errors of omission, let's say, for example, we have a situation where we may or may not have had a travel, but we don't have all the information visually that we've seen to determine whether or not that was a legal Euro step, for example, or if it might have been an extra step before they took the shot. We've been trained to err on the side of caution and not put air in the whistle in that situation versus an error of commission where I'm thinking I saw what I saw, I
Mm-hmm.
put air in the whistle, and now I've maybe taken a possession away from a team or I've penalized the defense if it's a foul ruling where I didn't have all the information with regards to having an open look on the play. So, kind of to
Yeah.
go back to the question you were just asking, if I've done everything that I've done to make sure that I've gotten an open look and I've seen everything I need to see, and I've properly prepared with my rules knowledge and video training and whatever else, the fans being on my case is going to be okay. They've got a bias investment with regards to who they want to win and who they want to succeed. And it's one of those things that I think one of the best pieces of gratitude that I can get as an official and my fellow officials can receive is when you have a coach or a fan be like, yeah, I disagreed with the call, but I see the ruling you came up with and I appreciate your integrity. I mean, that's the main reason we're out there, is to provide that
Right.
integrity and balance to the game.
And on some level, like, you're a fan first, so like you get it, right? It's like you get, it's part of, it would be pretty boring if we all just, if everyone in the fans just sort of sat on their hands and there were like little polite golf claps when someone made a shot. Like that would just
Yeah.
be weird,
Yeah.
you know?
No, you're absolutely right. And it's one of those things that I think that we talk about the basketball court, the baseball field, the football field, whatever the athletic competition field or court that we're working with, that's an extension of the classroom. And it's one of those things that the coaches and the players, the officials and the fans all need to work together to bring the energy that's positive and cheer on your team. But in the same light, making sure that we're keeping professional boundaries in place with regards to how we're interacting. I think that's what it comes down to. I think that you can have a disagreement with a call. One of the best parts about officiating that I find from a humorous standpoint is when, and I can't interact back because it's against our ethics, but having a great student fan section.
Oh yeah.
And they want to let me know how I'm doing on a given night. I'm very appreciative of their spot on evaluation, but it's just as much the energy that they bring into that gym. That's awesome for their classmates that are on the floor. It's great for the environment. And I think that's a learning lesson for them too, where they need to learn how to behave. You can get ruckus and have a fun time, but you also need to make sure that you keep it to a level that is not going to be degrading to the student athletes or anybody else that's participating in the game, including the officials.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing better than like a really loud student section, and if they're riding the officials, I mean, that's what they're gonna do. I don't know if you've seen this. I was gonna email it to you, and then I forgot to do that. They've actually done studies where a very loud student section or a very loud home court can actually buy a call. Like that, if the louder the crowd is, the more calls the team will get because you're a human being, and you don't want like 1,000 people booing you. So if you're not sure, it's that omission commission thing. If you're like, boy, maybe I don't know, maybe I didn't see that as well as I thought I did. Maybe you swallowed the whistle once or twice a game.
I mean, it could have, we are human and we talk extensively about that. I mean, within our officiating circles, we do the best we can both to prepare. And as the old saying goes, we need to start off perfect and improve from there. That's always the expectation for sports officials.
Yeah.
But we also understand that there is a human nature to it. And I think as much as we don't want to have a glaring mistake happen on our behalf and insert ourselves negatively into a game, I think there also is something to be said for having the human character brought into the sport that we're officiating itself. The argument that's been going on for years now and will continue for at least a couple more years is having automated balls and strikes versus a human being
Mm-hmm.
behind the plate making those rulings. And obviously, we're not going to have an ABS system at the high school level anytime soon. I don't think we're going to have anything for expanded replay in basketball
Yeah.
on anything beyond last second shot in the tournament anytime soon. And kind of to segue a little bit, I don't know if you saw, but even though we did not have to go to the monitor this past tournament, we did have a expansion of that. So it's going to be the end of every quarter now. And it's
Oh,
also
really?
going to include whether or not the player was inbounds or out of bounds when attempting the shot. So it's
That
going
makes
to
sense.
be so first we have to have the criteria: was the shot released prior to the expiration of time? And then if the crew is not sure, they can go to the monitor for that, whether or not it was a 2 point or a 3 point attempt, and then making sure the player was in bounds legally at the time of the release of the shot. So all of those things are going to carry over to all four quarters and overtime from the semifinals on. So I think it's good to see that we are making technological progress. I know that there has been some criticism, and all joking aside, from people that have commented on that on social media and such, that sometimes we're a little slow in Maine to catch on to technology with regards to our interscholastic athletics.
I have no idea what
Um,
you're talking about.
yes, I know, I know. And I'm sure if we need to fill the rest of this podcast, we can start talking about shot clocks too. Um,
It's on my
but
list.
it's on your list. Excellent. So I think it's one of those things that I think Maine is moving in the right direction in that regard, and I think that for the time being, the technology is good for where it needs to be. It's present and it's appropriate where it counts, and we can utilize that going forward.
Yeah, the last thing anyone wants to see is like it's something obvious that determines a game, the last shot of the game, and having that be wrong because, geez, like especially if it's so easily correctable to go, oh, hey, he was kind of standing out of bounds when he shot that, so
Yeah.
maybe it shouldn't count. And I hadn't heard that we were expanding it that much. I knew that that was in progress or there was talks about it or whatever, but I hadn't heard the final thing. One thing I think talking about the robot thing is I appreciate you and there's a bunch of other refs the dialogue with coaches. One of my favorite things to do because where I sit, as you know, like up above the benches, and I like to watch how the refs interact with coaches because it's wildly entertaining to me. Um, but I find that it seems to me that when a ref interacts with a coach and is not just sort of ignoring him, you get a better whistle because you see some refs they don't talk at all, and you're just like, oh, this is not going to end well.
Yeah.
And this is where I find that's where teams get teed up because they're just like yelling at a wall, and eventually, you just sort of hit a limit, and that comes
I
down.
think there's a lot of I appreciate you bringing up that question because again I think we've made a lot of progress in the last couple of years, especially in high school basketball in Maine, where we are given as officials more latitude to have conversations with the coaches than we maybe were able to in the past. And
Yeah.
we've been given parameters with regards to have those conversations begin and end appropriately. The other thing too is when National Federation put in the rule regarding a head coach bench personnel warning for unsporting behavior. That's allowing us to have a stop sign, or I should say, maybe a better way to put it is a benchmark before we go straight to the technical foul. So the first disclaimer I want to give is that a technical foul is just like any other foul. I think there's a lot more emotion that's tied to it,
Sure.
but when it's administered for a reason, and a technical can be for many different reasons. To go back to the point that you're making, where we don't progress to DEFCON 1 and have to get up to that level, I think that a lot of our training that can't be done within the rules modules and within the floor education, you really have to have the experience of working the games and understanding how to speak to coaches, how to understand where the thresholds are of what's appropriate conversation, what's inappropriate conversation. And what I mean by that is the coach asking a question for clarification, or is the coach arguing with you because they don't like the ruling that you just had? And it's
Right.
one of those things that if I have a team control foul against a coach's team and I happen to come up to their bench and before the ball is administered, because we're not supposed to be talking with coaches during live ball situations,
Mm-hmm.
but if that coach has a question of what did my player do wrong, quote unquote, and I can give them a quick explanation, I think that helps to diffuse the situation. If they have a disagreement with regards to the explanation I gave them, now we've got a situation where are we going to have a continuing argument that we need to manage appropriately and cease it? Or is it something where I can say, okay, coach, I appreciate your perspective. I understand if you saw it that way, then I probably got it incorrectly. But I can take that into account if we have this situation again. And that's another thing too, is even before there's a ruling, a lot of times we're making rulings. We call it rulings that don't have a whistle. So, Nick may ask me if I have Nick DePatsy, he might say, Chris, can you watch that moving screen at the top of the key? And I'll say, I can do that. I'll have players I'll have conversations with. And a lot of times those will be good opportunities for me to connect with them so that they realize that, as much as the spreadsheet tells me that I'm supposed to job them tonight when I work their game, um, it gives me an opportunity to connect with them and to realize that we're human and we're trying to do the best we can to help support their game and make sure it's a fair, fun contest. So we may have a player say, can you do me a favor and watch Blue 22? He's holding me in the post when I'm trying to get position. I'm like, yeah, I'll keep an eye on that. And then sometimes there's opportunities for us to ask clarifying questions. So they might say, did you see 22 holding me? And I said, was he holding you on the drive or was he holding you when you were posting up? Help me understand what I may have not seen. And then take that information, and we may have the same play, and the same defender might come down and do the same thing. And that's helping me to maybe widen my vision cone and be able to have a better understanding of something that maybe wasn't within my purview at the time when I was trying to see those rulings. Yeah, I think good professional conversations go a long way to keep the flow of the game going appropriately.
is that easier if it's a coach or a team that you've seen a bunch of times as opposed to, say you get to the tournament and it's someone you haven't seen before at all? Because if you're doing, a Madama game and it's Nick DePatsy, then you know how much Nick is going to talk to you, and sort of you have a baseline of, yeah, this is what I'm going to get out of Nick. This is what I'm going to get out of a Jeff Hart. This is what I'm
Yeah.
going to get out of these guys. And then you get someone new and you're like, I don't know this guy. Is he like,
You know what I find is I think that if you've so you're going to get, rightfully or wrongfully, I think this goes in any vocation. The longer you are established in a vocation, so let's say basketball officiating for example,
mhm,
your record is going to speak for itself, and that reputation may carry over. I feel fortunate that I feel like I've got a decent reputation with coaches I've worked with over several years. So if I'm working a game at Madomic Valley, or if I'm working a game at Lincoln Academy with Ryan Ball or whoever it may be, um, that's a situation where hopefully that rapport is going to give me a little bit of credibility when we're having those conversations, and I have that tough whistle that I have to have, or a tough ruling without a whistle. I think on the other end of it, we have a protocol for how we communicate with head coaches.
mhm,
So it's one of those things that if it's a coach I've never worked with before, it's not as hard to build that rapport for me as it may seem to be versus the coach that I see 3 or 4 times a year and I've seen for 18 years, whatever
right.
it may be. The one thing I find is that for myself personally, I want to work hard with the first time head coach that now is bringing a lot of energy to their team, but they maybe have never been a head coach before,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
and trying to speak with them to kind of have an understanding of, I'm here to work with you. I am willing to communicate with you, but here are the parameters I have to work with. So, kind of like what I was speaking about before, where if you have a question about a ruling, I'm happy to talk with you about that question or that ruling specifically. And then, progressively going back to the tools that we have in our toolbox with regards to managing the game as an official, it comes down to so first you have the general conversation, and that's absolutely fine. If the conversation on the team's end or the head coach's end gets out of hand, we can determine whether or not a coach, we're not going to go in that direction. Kind of a soft warning.
Mhm.
And then we have the progressive aspects of it, where it's the head coach bench personnel warning that's recorded in the scorebook. Then you get to technical foul phase if it's a continuing challenge. Um, my hope is always that it can just be a positive, continuing conversation. We're going to have times that we agree to disagree, and we're going to have times
Right.
where I will say to the coach, if that's the way you saw that play, then you probably had it right. And I'm not saying that in a
I've
sarcastic
heard you
way.
say that.
That's me acknowledging that they may have seen something either because they had a different angle than me, or it could be something where they obviously are in a position where they've got they've got capital in the jackpot, let's say. They want to be successful with the team that they're coaching. And it's one of those things that, we understand that too. We work hard. I've talked about integrity of the game, flow of the game, things like that. We want to make sure we're not inserting ourselves so that it has an effect on the game. We want to make
Right.
sure that the fairness is there so that somebody who is successful with a win in that game wins fair and square.
Let's talk about the inserting into the game, because that's one of my pet peeves, and it's newsworthy lately with the
Yeah.
Iowa UConn game. Um, so how do you avoid inserting yourself in the game and creating a situation where the officials determine the end of the game? Because that happens.
So I think that inserting
First of all,
ourselves,
did you think that was a moving screen?
that was a team control foul. That
I
was a
thought so.
team
Yeah.
control foul. So
Okay.
here's the thing that needs to be understood by the general public. And why is that on our radar screen? That's on our radar screen because there is so much video and there's so much technology and social media that's going to bring a highlight to that.
Right.
So in that same light, I think as was brought up by some other pundits, what happens if that official doesn't make that call and the game tying shot is put in and they were successfully open because they didn't call that moving screen?
Right.
I think with the technology the way it is, it used to be the old adage was time and score, quote unquote, played a factor into when we made rulings. So we were supposed to swallow the whistle.
Right.
I think with technology nowadays, we don't have a choice. We have to call the game in the first 30 seconds the same way that we call it the last 30 seconds, from a credibility standpoint. I think the times that we have more of a question of whether or not we need to insert ourselves into the game is more game management situations. So, am I going to administer discipline because of the behavior of this coach or this bench,
Right.
or the behavior of one of the players on the court? So, when we talk about inserting ourselves into the game, I think within the officiating circles, it ends up being more, are we inserting ourselves from a game management standpoint than we are a ruling, not ruling? I
I
can't.
always I always sort of look at it in that if you're a player, there are shots you can take and passes you can attempt in the first quarter that are fine. And if you attempt those same shots in the fourth quarter with 2 minutes left, you're gonna get benched.
Mhm.
You know? And so like I thought the moving screen was definitely a moving screen, and I think and I'm team don't decide the game and swallow the whistle. Generally, if it's unless it's
Yeah.
obvious and it's definitely affecting. What drives me crazy is when it's like a ticky tack foul with 3 minutes left, and oh, that's his fifth foul, and
Yeah.
then he's their best player, and the game is tied, and all of a sudden, like, and that's a foul that maybe would get overturned on review if we had replay, and that's the thing that drives me crazy.
Yeah. So I can appreciate that delineation. Um, Something to understand is that we can't follow the same manual of good shot, bad shot, what offense to run at certain times with the way that we administer the rules.
Mm-hmm.
It's a perfect analogy, but it has to be an apples and oranges comparison the way that it's
Sure.
lined up. And no, I think there is a fact. I mean, but again, following the same philosophy that we talked about or I talked about earlier, where errors of omission, errors of commission. If I'm using those same principles, I don't want to commit an error of commission at the end of the game. Same way I don't want to have that same mistake happen 4 minutes into the second quarter.
Right.
So if we're staying true to that philosophy, that, as the layman person would call it, the ticky tack foul. We hopefully are not going to grab that at that time if we didn't rule that same contact 5 minutes into the first quarter.
Right. Is there an awareness of the officials that, hey, this guy's in foul trouble?
I don't think we look for it, but I think the most succinct way to put it is that it can't have an impact on us making a ruling on a given play. I'm not going to have a situation where White 32, the star player for the home team, has four fouls. And now he's playing on defense and he steps in late and doesn't have legal guarding position on a player driving to the lane. And I'm going to have a blocking foul. I've already got enough going on in my head. I can't process in my head. White 32, going to be his fifth foul, hold your whistle.
Right. Okay.
Because there's so many other things that we're looking to process. You know, I consider myself a bright individual, but that's not something I could log into my order of operations.
You wouldn't be like, hey, Caitlin Clark's in foul trouble. Maybe don't blow the whistle here because we need these ratings to be good.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I'm obviously for basketball, I'm not at that level of an official, but I know for the level that I work at, that's something that, there may be an awareness, but it's not an awareness. It's not a purposeful awareness. And it's also not an awareness for the reason of saying that I need to control my rulings accordingly based on that person getting into foul trouble.
Gotcha. All
I
right.
think a better thing, kind of to wrap up on that topic, is more as officials we talk about making sure that if I'm with one or two other officials, that we are ruling contact the same way, on both ends of the court. So
Oh yeah, call it
depending,
both ways.
That's yeah, being well, not only both ways, but also consistent so that if I have a reaching foul of a certain type, so it would be an illegal contact foul on one end. We then go down to the other end of the court and we have that same contact, but there's no whistle from my partner, making sure that we are meshing so that we are all consistent with regards to contact rulings and the flow of the game. And when I call that foul, that hand check that Coach McNelly doesn't like in the first quarter, making sure I'm consistent. And if it's going to be in Coach McNally's favor in the fourth quarter because the player on the other team did the same thing, that we're being consistent with that contact.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
because there's nothing more frustrating for players or coaches to have like one official calling one game and the other official's calling a completely different game, and you're like, what are we even doing here?
No, I think that the what maybe is understated or maybe not thought about, and maybe I'm not giving as much credit to people as I should, but with regards to the pregame conversations that we have as a crew before we even go on the court, every game, whether it's a partner I have worked with 10 times this season, or if it's the first time I've ever worked with this partner, we're having a good pregame to talk about what our coverage is going to be. And it might even be redundant. 90% of that conference is going to be just refreshing to make sure we're on the same page with how we're handling those situations. And then when we go in at halftime, it's more than just getting a water and catching our breaths for 8 minutes. It's more a matter of also talking about how do we feel the flow of the game is going? Do we feel like that we are making rulings that are consistent with what we should be grabbing for fouls or with regards to overall flow of the game? So it's not something that we go in there and just take a coffee break and don't keep working. I mean, we're mentally and verbally talking with each other about how we're going to approach that second half and making sure that we're staying consistent with what we had the first half and make adjustments as necessary if we need to.
You just got to update your spreadsheet and make sure that your balance is it's
With
going where you need
technology
it.
nowadays, I pull it right up on my phone. I can bring it right up from Google Drive and,
Nice.
update the data. Actually, that's why we go to the table. It's not to drop off the ball. It's just to make sure I have the right amount of team files and individual files so I can log it into my data sheet at halftime. That's exactly
That's
it.
that's clutch. I can do the heel points now from my phone. I just pull it up on the Google sheet and it's real fast.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, technology nowadays. I just think about, you know, the wonderful days where we would wait for the Press Herald to come out and Bob Butler had done the statistics on paper and sent them into the paper to see
Oh
where your
geez.
team was in the standings.
That's crazy. How much does it help for in officiating players like to have seen a team a bunch of times as opposed to coming at them new, to know, oh, this player, I know he's going to do this and I know this one's going to, block a lot of shots or that sort of thing.
The way I look at it is it's nice to have a familiarity with offenses and defenses and how they run their sets. But I work really hard, and all of our officials work really hard to not have prejudices.
Mhm.
If I had somebody who had foul trouble a couple weeks earlier in a game that went into the fourth quarter, I'm not going to remember going into that game tonight the situation with that player. It's a clean
Gotcha.
slate when I walk into the gym. The only thing that's going to be helpful to me is knowing the offensive and defensive sets that I may remember from the times that I worked them. So, man to man defense with trap pressure in certain situations versus a 2-3 zone, that's going to help us to be mentally aware of where our vision cone should be and what our thought process and preparation should be. Same thing with offenses. Do we have a lot of perimeter shooting? Do we have a lot of working it into the post? Um, those types of things. Do we have a team that likes to work fast and runs the old Coney offense where they're up and down the court in 10 seconds and they bring in a new set of subs? Or are we working an offense that's going to be running a set offense and is going to be looking to move the ball around more and try to get the optimum shot? Those types of things. And of course, those vary with teams and their matchups too. You could have a team 2 weeks ago that was running gun, and then 2 weeks later, they're running a methodical offense because they want to keep the ball out of their opponent's hands because of who they're playing that night. So we
Right.
can be mentally prepared for what we think they might have, but at the same time, we have to come into it without prejudice with regards to rulings we may have had with a team a couple weeks earlier.
Are you able, with the onslaught of video and streaming that we now have, are you able to scout teams at all and to just say like, "Hey, I haven't seen Mount View this year. Maybe watch like 10 minutes of Mount View tape just to get a sense of them."
I don't do that. What is helpful is that we do get a couple of videos from IABO that are you make the call videos.
Hmm.
And what they do is they take videos from around the country and it may cover a topic of was this a travel? Was this illegal contact? We had a unique one this last week that was ball was inbounded, ball was brought from back court to front court. They ran their offense and they made a basket. And the question was, do you have the ability to take time off the clock because they didn't start the clock on the inbound all the way until the ball went into the basket?
Oh,
So we have those types of videos as well. It's not just a block charge video. It's not just a do you have this player traveling? So that ends up being more helpful to me with regards to preparing for a game than going and looking at video and saying, I want to see how Oceanside runs their offense. I want to see how their screening is at the top of the key, things like that. That's more stuff that I gather from if I've had that team before. And
hmm.
I'll have a question occasionally. So if I have a partner that I'm working with that night, I'll be like, hey, have you seen Mount View play this year? And we have Mount View that night. They can maybe add some information
Right.
and just go from there.
And so those you make the call videos, that's basically a version of the test, right? Like where the because you sent me one of the a bunch of sample
Yeah.
questions for the test,
Yeah.
and because I wanted to see how I could do going in completely cold, just like I took the SATs with zero prep, and I did okay, but it was tricky to like read those questions and like there were just these really weird wordings. But I think the video would have been easier.
I think that the way that our exam is written, it's written in a way where it makes us use the proper verbiage in the
Hmm.
rule book for certain things. Um, so, for example, we don't have a mid-court line; we have a division line by rule.
Hmm.
Things of that nature, making sure that we've got the right wording, and that also includes when. So, I'll give you a fan favorite. We have a lot of over the back fans
Oh, we love
in
the over the
Maine.
back. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's one of those things that, in layman's terms, um, we have over the back, which is if you're tall and you can jump over the player, that's over the back and that's legal.
Right.
In layman's terms, if you're on the back, now you've got a foul. Now, in rules terms, what you would have is it is illegal contact because that player did not maintain verticality when they were going up for the rebound, for example.
Hmm.
And those are the things that we need to have understanding. So if Coach DePatsy is asking me, what did you have on that illegal contact? And I said, I had the player not maintaining verticality, so they caused illegal contact during the rebounding action. I'm not going to say they were on the back, over the back, because of
Right.
the fact that that's not rules language. We're there to enforce the rules. And it takes away from my credibility in that game and maybe beyond, depending on what language I use.
That threw me on the test a little bit because I didn't know some of the terms, and I was
Yeah,
sort of looking at it going, uh, "What are we even asking here?" And I think
yeah,
I was looking back at it the other day, and I got one of them wrong because I think I misread the question, and it was something like there was a end of quarter shot and a foul on it, and then the buzzer, and I think my reading of it was that there was the shot got off and then the buzzer, but I think what the rule was asking was it was person started their shooting motion, but got fouled, buzzer, then the shot was released, and then there was something about the free throws,
yeah.
and that kind of threw me.
So you've got a determination of whether or not you have in the act of shooting, and then the other aspect is you have questions about are you continuing the quarter that you're in,
Hmm.
or are you into the next quarter if there's any type of penalties that come with a technical foul, for example. The
Right.
situation you're speaking of, um, there often is the situation where, let's say, the ball is released by the shooter and the ball is in the air, the buzzer sounds, and then a player gets fouled.
Hmm.
There's illegal contact by the defense because the shot is still being attempted. The ball is still live even after the buzzer goes off.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that was
So,
one where I was like, I think a video would have helped me here.
yes. So the video piece of it, it does help to bring the rules book to life. And it does allow us to be able to see plays that we might not see normally in a game.
Hmm.
Um, we could have goaltending, basket interference, which we do have some of that in Maine, but we maybe don't see it as frequently based on the different classes in Maine and
Right.
the varying student athletes. So those are always good ones to watch. Um, there are repetitive, I mean, there's so many different ways to move with the basketball. And there are new ways being developed that are within the legal rules set. You know, a couple of years, the Euro step being the next big thing. And we had a focus several years ago on that, saying this is a legal Euro step. This is an illegal attempt at a Euro step. And I think that helped a lot with regards to um, being able to be a better official and not penalize somebody for having a great athletic move.
Because for a stretch there, every Euro step was a travel. There
It
was a
was,
good, there was a good
yeah,
couple, at least a half season worth of. If you even tried a Euro step, no, no, not having it.
no. And I think the combination of us getting better at recognizing the pivot foot and recognizing the steps involved with that move, and then also leaning again on our errors of commission, errors of omission, we're going to hold a whistle if we didn't feel like we saw every part of that play.
Right.
Yeah.
Real quick question: how happy are you that the dunk technicals seem to be gone?
Um, they didn't have much of an effect on me, but I think from a public relations standpoint, it was a good thing that that progressed.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think it was a
Uh,
good progression. Yeah.
it was so much fun. I sold some T-shirts, so there was that. Um, what would you guys? Let me reword this. Do you think we should put on the programs a list of rules that people just don't understand? Like, hey, this is how over and back. This is what a backcourt violation is, guys. Just to shut
Mhm.
people up. Would that help?
So this is going to allow me to tell a legendary story that I was
Oh,
not present
perfect.
for, but it goes along with Commissioner Webb. So I know you're going to enjoy it just
I'm
from
a big
that
fan.
respect. Um, I think if there was interest and there was an opportunity, just having a 90-minute or 2 hour Zoom session where fans could engage and have a session with either their local rules interpreter or the coordinator of officials. I There's so many different intricate rules and interpretations. I don't think you could fit it. I mean, there's a reason why they have a rules book and we have a rules manual. I don't think you could fit it on one program. But I think if there was an effort for school administrators to coordinate with our officiating organizations and say, hey, fans, learned about legal rebounding, then they could come onto the Zoom session and we could talk about often misunderstood rules and why we administer things the way that we do. And, you know, one of the great ones is when I think one of the most interesting things to me is when fans get irate because we have to issue a delay a game warning. And if the fans understood why we have the delay a game warning, maybe that would make them less irate. Probably not with regards to that rule. But it's one of those things that the reason why we have the warning and then we have the technical that follows it is because it's an unfair advantage for whatever you're doing to affect the team. In most cases, your team just made a basket and now you're taking the ball after the make and you're tipping it away so you can set up your defense. Do you want the other team doing that to you? See who can tip the ball away the furthest and delay the game?
We want
No.
to do that all night?
We want to have it be a game of integrity. I mean, if you think we waste time with not having a shot clock, how much time are we going to waste chasing a ball that's being tipped so it can't be inbounded legally, right?
Yeah, at
You
some of
know,
these gyms, it would just be under the bleachers, be a whole
well,
mess.
That's exactly it. What was it, an Onion story that they said Maine basketball game canceled because the ball got stuck under the wood stove? I think it was, or something like
Yeah,
that.
it was like a
Anyway,
Class D game.
yeah, exactly. But nonetheless, I think maybe having a better understanding with those types of rules, and why we have those rules there and why we have to enforce them fairly. To kind of go back to the story, the legend has it that Commissioner Webb was still officiating, and he had a game out at Owlsboro, and the Owlsboro fans were questioning a number of the rulings. So Mr. Webb actually did a rules clinic at halftime while the teams went into the locker room and was giving a full explanation of why they shouldn't disagree with the rulings that were being given. That's a story that's been passed down a number of times, but um, knowing Mr. Webb, I'm sure that he took the time to do that. And hopefully there was some education gained from those fans in that situation.
How annoying is it when the fans are mad about like it's like a 40-point game and they're arguing about an out of bounds call and it's like, guys, we're all just trying to go home. This is over.
I interpret that as their frustration with the situation. I think the majority of the times the fans that are irate about that out of bounds call are the ones that are down by that 40 points. So I just kind of take it in stride. And that argument, we're not stopping the game to have a conversation with them about whether or not
Right?
we got it right or wrong. We're just going to move on, and it's just going to be, for me, it doesn't irritate me at all. At times I'll be direct. I find the fans' interactions, and obviously they've got to be one way because we can't communicate back with the fans. I find them often to be entertaining. And again, if they stay within the bounds, it brings a lot of energy to the game. And even if it's the one where the call goes against them, and it's a situation where it was obvious, at least in our respects, that we got the ruling right, just move on with it. That's the way I look at it.
What's the funniest thing you've ever heard from a fan in terms of like a heckling or whatever?
I don't know if it was like anything that was original, but it was just the timing of it. And we had a play where I had a call go out of bounds, and I'm getting ready to administer the throw in. And there was like the initial murmur and grumbling about the ruling, and then it just kind of got quiet before I was ready to hand the ball off. I just heard the fan yell out, "Hey, Lenscraft is called. Your prescription's in." And I'm standing there just trying not to laugh, but his comedic timing was perfect. The line wasn't like overly original, but the way it was delivered in that moment, I had to check myself to make sure I kept my game face on.
That's key though, is you gotta wait for the murmur to go down. Because back when I used to yell at the officials, that's what I would do. You gotta wait for the ebb, and that's when
Yeah.
you hit it because you get the most value for your buck there.
No, and he hit it perfectly. He absolutely did, no doubt about it. Um, there's been a number of interesting interactions over time. That's the one that I probably remember the most. But yeah,
My
all good. I
favorite
mean,
one,
I
my
was gonna say
favorite one.
I've had the random Stevie Wonder chants. We all
Oh yeah,
we all deal with those. Yeah.
the best one I ever heard was Lincoln Madomic as a doubleheader, and the power was out. I don't know. You might have even done this game. The power was out at Madomic, so they moved the game to Lincoln. And
I
so
don't think that was me, but yeah, continue
so
on.
then in the girls' game, and it was Mr. Loose is the person who did this heckle, who I know you know that voice. Um, so missed call, let's say in the girls' game, you get the murmur, then the quiets down a little bit, and he yells out, "Geez, if you're gonna call like that, we could have blamed the dark."
That's a pretty good one.
I think the official lost it. I think like the official broke down.
We're human too. We're
Yeah.
human too.
All right, so I got to make sure I ask you this question. This is a future looking question because I have a 7-year old and obviously I'm trying to get him into off of Minecraft and into basketball.
Mhm.
I think it is my responsibility as a parent to teach him the Mutombo finger wag. Come into Mutombo house. If I do that though, is he going to get technicals for doing that in games? And can we work out an exception where because I feel like it's my responsibility as a student of the game to teach him that, but then you're going to tee him up, I feel like.
I may be speaking out of turn on this. I may be able to give you the one loophole on this. I may actually be able to give you the one loophole on this. If it's
Because,
positive and it's directed at his own bench.
oh, okay. So that's the trick. He can't do it to the opponent,
He
but he
can't
could
do
do
it in
it.
front of the opponent. He can't do it towards the opponent. Any language that maybe comes with it. So if I hear him do the no, 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 not today, that probably is not going to go very well. Yeah.
But you would
So
hate to
it's
call
one of
that
the,
technical, wouldn't you?
I think unfortunately we would have to have some sort of penalty come with that. You know, it's one of those things that if the energy stays positive and it's directed with your teammates and you keep it that way, then it ends up being because there's a lot of great energy that comes with that. But when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
unsporting like taunting,
Right.
it's one of those things. Yeah, we love to see that play where I mean we enjoy watching professionals. Let's say you take that same play and Jalen Brown comes out of nowhere, and or even better example, Derek White comes out of nowhere and blocks a shot into the third row because Derek White and his stature, you're not looking at him and saying this is a guy who's a shot blocker, but
Right.
you look at the stats and you go, this guy's got a good number of stats for a guard, and stands over the opponent or whatever. It's sort of like there's like what's the word I'm looking for? Guilty pleasures,
Mm-hmm.
as a sports fan. But at the local level, the sportsmanship needs to maintain at a certain level.
Yeah.
We're still talking about student athletes, and I was doing a college baseball game the other day. Great example where you know kid struck out. It was a called third strike. I was the plate umpire, and he kind of got aggravated. He looked like he was going to say something to me, and then he turned that aggravation into, "Was that as far as the corner goes on the plate?" And I said, "That's as far as I'm going today." And he turned back around, and one of the assistant coaches came out and said, "Hey, hey, hey, Blue, we're sorry about that. We'll go take care of that." And I just said to him, I said, "Listen, he didn't say anything out of turn in that situation." And a lot of times we forget that these are at the college level, it's 18 to 22-year-old kids. Yes,
Yeah.
they're boys in men's bodies. And I think it's kind of the same thing when we look at these high school athletes in Maine, where you've got some really athletic looking individuals, mature looking kids. And we need to remember these are 14 to 18-year-olds. And they're kind of learning how to control their emotions as well as, what's my best post move or what's the best way to get around the screen to shoot this three. And
Right.
again, coming back to the guilty pleasure of, oh yeah, we love to see the showmanship, seeing LeBron do the stomp down after he either has a block shot or he makes a dunk. That's good for the professional level. But, for student athletes here in Maine and across the country, I think as adults, we've got an obligation. So, keep teaching him the Mutombo. He can do his wrist exercises to make sure that he's fully ready when he has the no, 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 not today. But just make sure he's directing it at his teammates on the bench
All right.
before he transitions down. Or if it's a block shot out and it's not like a Bill Russell shot where he
Mm-hmm.
tips it to a teammate for a score and it goes out of bounds and you're still on defense, would highly recommend he get ready for the next defensive set so that he doesn't get burned when they get it inbounded.
All right. One last question, 'cause we're almost out of time.
Yeah.
What is the one rule if they put you in charge? What's the rule you change?
Well, I'll actually the one rule in basketball that they actually are discussing is taking a flopping technical and changing it to a warning. So what would
Oh.
happen is if offensive player is driving to the hoop and the defensive player in legal guarding position fakes being fouled and goes to the floor, what they're talking about doing is we're going to have a whistle and a warning, and the ball will go back to the offense in that situation. I believe that's what Federation is considering.
Interesting.
The one that comes immediately to mind, that's the one where it would be good if there was an intermediary penalty. I don't know if we could make that happen, but from a layman's standpoint, that's probably the one I would like to see considered, so
Yeah, the
that there's some
technicals.
sort of a warning that comes with it, kind of like the same way a couple years ago where we, but the same at the same time, if you change it to a warning, are you kind of giving a mulligan to the defense to allow a play to stop by doing that? I just wish there was some way that you could change that so that it didn't go straight to the technical foul. Um, I'll let the rules makers consider that. From what I've seen, they seem to be doing so, and I'm glad that they are. That'd probably be the one thing. And I mean, I know we're running out of time. I know that there was talk about a shot clock. The
Yep.
one thing I will say, all joking aside, my understanding is that the Maine Basketball Commission has been talking about it. So it's not something that's not on their radar screen from the minutes and the communication I've seen from them. I think it's just a matter of making it so that it is feasible for all schools to be able to uniformly put it across.
I think
And
it's
not every
inevitable.
school has the resources to do that. I'm sure that's the same argument you've had or you've heard from other administrators. But I think for those that are listening and do care about that topic, I don't think it's lost. I don't think it's not heard by individuals.
Yeah, I think it's just a question of inevitability and people going, okay, how do we do this? And it might just be a thing where it starts at double A and A and works its way down, which is what a lot of states have done.
Yeah, I think over the next couple of years, you'll see that conversation continue and see that progression. We probably won't be the first in the nation. Well, obviously, we won't be the first in the nation to roll that out. But it's one of those things that I think over time you'll see some sort of progression with regards to that.
Yeah, I don't think we'll be last either.
No, I think that we are a passionate enough state with basketball that there will be people that will work to make it happen and make it feasible for all schools to have it.
Have you done games with the shot clock?
I have not actually.
Oh, okay. So you didn't do
Yeah,
they did that test at the Civic Center a couple years ago, and I was wondering if you did any of those games.
I didn't. I have never worked with a shot clock. I don't think the administration. I mean, it would be an adjustment. This year the big adjustment I found for myself and some of my partners were the new throw-in spots in the front court.
Mm,
Um, and I hope from the games that you saw, I know that wasn't your primary focus in watching the games, but I felt like we had to work hard in our minds to make sure we were getting the ball in the right designated spot on those violation situations in the front court. But in the end, I think that it was rolled out pretty seamlessly by our officials. I think the same thing would happen with the shot clock, where we might need to think a little bit harder with how we're administering a violation and how it relates to. I mean, that's the thing that a lot of people don't think about too, is this conversation about how does the shot clock factor in with backcourt violations.
right.
How much are we using the clock? Because there's certain rules for when the 10-second count starts versus when the shot clock starts, and how are
Right.
we administering those differentiations? Because most states that have the shot clock, they're using that shot clock as the visible tool for when 10 seconds has been reached.
Which would
So,
help.
yeah.
Make it easier.
It would, but it just, again, it's one of those things that we got to make sure we adjust to and move forward from there.
Yeah, and at those games at the Civic Center, it was really the only struggle was every so often they'd go, "Oh wait, how does it work here in this situation?" And it'd be like a quick huddle, and they go, "Oh no, 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 I remember this. Okay,
So
here
it
we go."
resets to 20 seconds because of the whatever. So what was it, like a rebound situation? Then it went
Yeah,
out of bounds off the defense. So then, okay, we got to reset it to 20 seconds versus 30 seconds. Yeah, something like
yeah, and
that.
it's just the weird stuff that was just like, "Oh, how do they do this in the Celtics games?" I don't know. that sort of that sort of thing. All right, so I've taken up enough of your time. How tell people how if they're interested in becoming an official, if they like people yelling at them, how how they can start this process.
Well, I do want to emphasize the experience. I've obviously benefited from it for 28 plus years. And the fans yelling actually ends up being a minority situation. But the energy in the gyms and the people you get to meet and the games you get to participate in are outstanding. If you go to mainbasketballcouncil.org, or if you go to iabo.org, and that's spelled IAABO.org, there is a link for becoming official on both of those pages from the basketball side. And then locally also, if there's other sports you are interested in, if you go to mpa.cc, the Maine Principals Association website, there is a link to become an official, and there are contacts for every sport that the MPA sponsors. So if you want to become a lacrosse official, if you want to become a baseball umpire, there are opportunities there to participate as well. And it's one of those things that anybody who knows me in this mid-coast region that wants to reach out to me, I'll be happy to help connect you personally with somebody. I'm involved in 3 of the sports, but as you can imagine, a lot of those connections cross over to other sports. So, for example, the president of our local basketball board is also very extensively involved with field hockey. So, if somebody wanted to become a field hockey official, we can build that bridge for them.
Awesome, awesome. And you told me earlier this year that I've got the wrong name for the baseball All Stars. That it's the Jeff Mertzel All Stars and not
That
the
is
Webb All Stars.
absolutely correct. Yes. Mr. Mertzel has been our interpreter. I want to know, when are we getting merch? So you've got media,
Uh
and
huh.
you've got your website,
Uh
and
huh.
you've got your newsletter.
Yeah.
We need merch because me and Mr. Kinney are going to be the first and second online to buy our Jeff Mertzel All Stars T-shirt and wear it proudly to every game that we officiate in Maine this season.
I could probably work on that. There are T-shirts on the site, but nobody ever buys them. And I did have mugs made at one point. I have one right here actually. Oh, look, it's like
Okay, so
croqueting out.
yeah, so it's kind of, so you got your look. So we need officiating swag. It's one
Hmm.
of those things that if you can get a Jeff Mertzel All Stars on a mug, something like that,
Yeah.
I'll drink that in the office. I'll take selfies with it and send it to Mertz. It'll be good.
I did make a T-shirt that said "volunteer official." That was, I think my father has one.
Yeah. Am I allowed to have that since I'm certified and I'm actually an official, or
You could do that. Yeah, I don't see why
yeah,
not.
I'll just wear it to the YMCA and the AAU games. Yeah, we'll
There
do
you go.
that.
We're at to
That'll be
Celtics
good.
games.
Yes, absolutely.
Actually, I had one more question for you. When you're at a Celtics game, are you yelling at the officials? Or are you like Gene Steratore, where you've never disagreed with an official in your life?
um, I think that at the pro level, if I think that an official has not made a correct call, I am a fan first. But I do also believe that I have seen. Well, let me give you a great situation. Do you remember the World Series where there was the obstruction ruling on Will Middlebrooks and the winning run for the Cardinals scored
Yeah, I
uh,
think so.
from third? I think that was the '07 World Series. Maybe it was the '13 World Series. Um, that was a play where a lot of people disagreed with the obstruction ruling, and I was angry as a Red Sox fan, but I also know the right ruling was made. So I think my officiating brain does creep in when I am watching contests, rightfully or wrongfully. I am not the TV analyst that agrees with every call that's made by the officials on the court when the play-by-play announcer goes to them and says, "What do you think?" And just go, "Yeah, it looks good." No, I've
Yeah,
had disagreements where I've watched games and I've said, "Yeah, I probably wouldn't have had that ruling." Again, though, they're in that moment and they're live, and there's a lot of factors that go into the angle that they're at. So I don't want to sound like a complete advocate for officials because yes, we're human, we're going to make mistakes, and there are levels that I am a fan at. But you know, to answer your
awesome.
question, yeah, at times I do have a figure it out that I yell from the crowd. A lot of times lately now it's more focused towards the teams that I'm rooting for than it is the officials and their rulings. But
Fair
nonetheless,
enough. All right, thank you so much for doing this. This has been great. I've learned things about officiating through this, and hopefully we can get some people to start the process of becoming officials and joining you out there on the floor.
appreciate the opportunity to get the word out and to connect with you, and talk again soon.
All right, thank you so much. Let me read the little disclaimer thing that, where did I put it? All right, this podcast has been a production of MaineBasketballRankings.com, your source for the most comprehensive coverage of Maine high school basketball from Ashland to York and everywhere in between. This podcast is available wherever you listen to podcasts and all of the places you don't. And if you enjoyed this, leave a nice review, say some nice things. You can give some real-time feedback to an official in a different venue in written word. Um, and it also helps with the algorithm. So thank you for listening. Until next time, this is the Maine Basketball Rankings podcast.